Everyday topics and everything in between. This is Real Free Flowing Words Podcast with the Rhyme Ruler.
Welcome to Real Free Flowing Words, a podcast about everyday topics and everything in between. I'm the Rhyme Ruler, and this episode will be slightly different from the previous ones I've done because, for one, I'm joined by a guest, my friend John, and we'll be talking about the objective basis of morality and what is deemed moral on an individual and collective scale. This episode's topic is based on American philosopher Thomas Nagel's work on the objective basis of morality. Furthermore, this episode will contain how religions tie into morality and whether it's contingent on having moral standards. This episode was recorded through Zoom, and I hope the audio was clear enough for you to hear. With that said, before I get into this episode's topic, the poem for this episode is titled The Wanderer. Sometimes I wonder if anyone is watching how despair torments the lone wanderer. Under the quiet moonlight, a currency of shadows encircles him, sinking him deeper and deeper. The surface of life is on the verge to seal shut. He watches those around him carry the same strangeness, dreadful in the shallowness of their damaged hearts. One thing was certain, the morning storm couldn't distract him from his voyage. The wanderer cries silently not for the loneliness that accompanies him, but for the pity that reigns his soul. Embarking on the darkest chapter, the blackened clouds, the only compass he can trust. Profoundly engrossed in his own self-styled ethical standards and ideal of religion. The wanderer takes no notice of the wheelworks of rays in the sun that shines brokenly, or the moonlight that hides his identity. His heart moans for hyperactive temptations. The wanderer knows that there is no easy path to happiness, so for now, he'll endure the dangers until the end of time.
So, what's up, John?
Hey.
Like I said before in the beginning of this episode, we're going to talk about Thomas Nagel's article on the objective basis of morality. So, when I began writing this blog post, I posed two questions to my readers. How do you determine and gauge morality, and what factors do you think can influence your perspective on it? So, in the article, I summarized his argument, and one of the quotes that stood out to me was, "If you resent it when other people hurt you, then you will think you have a good reason not to hurt others." With that said, he goes on to prove belief that morality exists. Additionally, he does give reasons and explains why people should follow a golden rule. The golden rule, if people know, it's in the Bible, so that will be a benchmark for morality and why he doesn't believe ethical obligations can be reduced by religion or legal ones. So he names numerous examples to solidify his argument, and he begins by giving a few scenarios. But before I go into giving the numerous scenarios he goes into, I want to give the floor to John if he has anything to say.
Yeah, like you said, he considers himself to be an idealist in the Bible or biblical or Kantian way, where there's a goal to like somewhere to aim your values and whatnot, but it doesn't have to be according to him. It's more like as a result of empathy, like natural empathy that people have, as opposed to some obligation that religion or laws might impose.
Right. So I'm gonna begin with the one scenario he brings up in the article. So in scenario one, he begins with the scenario by having, so person one is an employee at the library. We're gonna name him just person one for the sake of this podcast. So, and person two is his friend. So the person two comes in and says he or she wants to smuggle out references. He asked person one friend if he or she could help him smuggle out some references. So here's the thing: any logical person would feel uncomfortable about the situation, because even if they can deliver what their friend wants through unethical ways, they would want to prevent their friend from getting in trouble and jeopardizing their job. Plus, it would result in people not being able to have the opportunity to use those missing resources. So it's a lose situation for both parties. I want to go into speaking about rational choice theory. When it comes to rational choice theory, the individual, they're self-interested basically. So as in the beginning, it's individuals in the beginning. Second would be the individuals will try to do everything to maximize their goals, and individuals are self-interested. So people are can freely choose how they want to behave, if it's in a good manner or a deviant manner, you know. So those choices can be controlled through the perception and understanding that there is going to be repercussions for their actions, but the the punishment is not really what they're really afraid of. I feel like they'll still go through with what they want to accomplish because, like I said, they're self-interested at the end of the day. And the example I said before, person one will see that they could probably gain something that is going to be of value to them. So they will either help or deter their friend from actually committing an act that's going to, jeopardize both their lives. So, I mean, if you want to add to that, John, if you want.
Yeah, and on one case, you're talking about like one's own reasoning to whether or not an action is good or bad. And in Nagel's example, he's talking about how someone in their mind makes those judgments based on consequences and whatnot, but they might end up, despite the obligations, still doing something because of the mutual connection they might have or whatever self-interest they have. But as Nagel would say, it's if in an objective morality, there it's coming down to, like you said, the golden rule sort of idea where it's not about self-interest, and if the legal system or the religious system is not enough, or if it doesn't suffice, I guess, then because people will do things regardless, then we must have our own sort of inherent ethics due to empathy, by comparing situations, by putting yourself in other people's shoes. That's what the empathy idea is coming from. So it's against the idea of religious institutions or legal institutions, as well as something you might bring up a little bit later on, moral relativism.
Right. I also want to bring. I will talk about utilitarianism later on, but I'm gonna go into explaining more of his argument. So Nagel further explains his argument by reasons when it comes to religious beliefs. So these religious beliefs cannot correlate to one deciding to do good or bad. And even if the person is an atheist, he or she would still, they still have a sense of discernment of what's right and wrong. Moreover, so the third objection would go on to talk about is like I mentioned before, even though it is cliche, like I brought up in the beginning, you also brought up, was the golden rule in the Bible. If you treat someone with the consideration, they'll do the same for you.
Yes, do unto others.
Exactly. So the statement does have merit, because your action towards others will decide how they react towards you, and it's
a logical reasoning. It's literally it's an objective reasoning, meaning something that if you can observe something as causing suffering, and then you can then assume that you would not want the same fate to occur to you, and then it's not just like bad for the one scenario, it's objectively bad. It's like bad in general, because no matter who's in the situation, if it's a lose-lose situation, or one person is at the expense of something, and you wouldn't want that to happen to you, then it's just generally bad. You don't need laws, you don't need religions to indicate that for you. It's natural.
Right.
If you're rational enough, if you're a sane person, basically.
Yeah. So Gal concludes with the final scene that deals with signs of remorse being absent from hurting people. So the scenario he brings up described was of a person stealing someone's belongings and not taking into account how it might hurt that person. Since they are, like I said before, this is going back to choice theory. They're doing something that is they're self-interested. They're going to do whatever they can to obtain whatever they want by any means necessary, and that mindset would cause no moral decisions to be made due to the selfish determination that negates any consideration for the victim and the inevitable psychological damage it would cause. So
right.
That is
yeah. Just to add to that, the self-interest idea is in some ways an argument towards Nagel's like real moral realist idea, is because not everyone behaves, even if some people just have their self-interest so much so in mind that they don't really care, even if they can put themselves in other people's shoes. So that kind of conflicts with what he with what he believes, because yeah, people can be driven by other means as opposed to just empathy, because not some people don't live their lives or some people are just not that empathetic in general, but most people can understand in their mind at least it's a bad action, but they might follow through regardless. So anyway, yeah.
right.
So
and when it comes to moral relativism, it can be subjective for the fact that what is deemed as moral is determined by an individual's beliefs and conventional moral standards. They're understood and agreed on within a specific society. That's on the collective scale, but on the individual scale, people will act reckless and they will do things to their best interest, if it is good or bad. But and it varies from culture to culture. In the example where the employee person one helped the friend person two steal references from a book, if a focus group of individuals were asked what they felt about it, I believe if they would come up with different answers and might even they'll conflict with each other, and even some might even justify the stealing if what they stole was for greater means, like discovering a solution to global warming or finding ways to find a treatment for a disease or something. So there's always exceptions relative to the situation or on what is considered moral, because the intentions of the person and the consequences from their action will really depend on the situation and how dire it is that person wants to have it accomplished, I believe.
all right.
I'm not sure if
in
you want
in, a, in an extreme case, you can think of the idea of a cannibalistic society in their own belief. It's not that they're doing anything wrong, and a lot of especially in societies that might have sort of like or cultures or whatnot that might have sort of a eye for an eye type way of thinking. Well, they have their own way of justice, I guess they would. But like, you can think of an extreme case where, like, of course, objective, if morality is objective, regardless of the person's intent or whether they knew they were doing something bad or not, it's bad, like eating people, for example. But according to those people, it might not be. So there are many ways that it could be relative because people are subjective.
That's true. And I brought up earlier the concept of utilitarianism. So if when utilitarianism, by definition, if the listeners are unaware of what it is, it's the moral theory that holds that the rightness or wrongness of an action is determined by the balance of good over evil that is produced by that action. Philosopher Jeremy Bentham identified good with pleasure and evil with pain, and held that the greatest pleasure should belong to the greatest number of people. That is utilitarianism.
Yeah, and that would be an argument against moral relativity. But, you know, one argument against that is, you know, Nietzsche's idea of moral relativity, because when you leave those types of decisions up for debate, or not up for debate, up for, you know, the those that be to decide, it might not ultimately be, you know, the whole thing is like the road to hell is paved in good intentions, or, you know, whatever you might say, you know, for the greater good, how much are you willing to sacrifice? So, and his idea is that institutions can be corrupted, you know, and the way he was looking at it from when he was around is that there were lords that, or other royalty that would, they were the ones making the rules about what is right and wrong. So according to them, they whatever they did was for the greater good, right? But so he believed that people should create their values and morals based on, you know, it's a reactive example of morality, where you compare, where you're actively looking at the world, looking at yourself, and how and constructing it over time, as opposed to having this golden rule, or perhaps like having it be a wild west, because that's what moral relativism becomes. It crumbles. It's like a pitfall, because you can never be like, it's an excuse to let people do what they want to do.
Yeah. Would you say that without the moral standards, would you say that, I believe that having the moral standards, that is having order. Without that, it would lead to chaos. Would you agree with that or no?
That's complicated. I don't know the answer, but I don't think it's been tried. Like it there's like, you know, you hear about nowadays, there's like anarchists ideas of, what's that guy? I forget his name.
I was just about to bring up anarchy. I was trying to phrase my question. Would you think it leads to anarchy? But I just said chaos instead. But yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, that the idea of anarchy is basically that there's no supervision. So chaos, aka whatever. Like there's no top-down supervision, but it can be constructed in a way where, you know, there's still some social institutional aspects. I think, I don't know how well it would perform on a grand scale, but I think a hybrid of some sort can be useful. I don't know if we need huge governments, but I don't. But at some like you need police. Like you can't just leave it up to, you know, oh, you can just defend yourself. Like and you know what? A lot of the socialist ideas of like UBI and stuff, you know, there's sometimes, I don't know, you can argue one way or another, but you know, like maybe for kids, UBI, you know, you need something, universal basic income, I mean by UBI. You know?
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know, but
so you're saying a deterrence would be needed then, huh?
Well, I mean, like Winston Churchill said, you know, I don't know, I might butcher what he said, but like, you know, what we have right now in the West isn't the best, but it's like the best we've got. Like there's a lot of things wrong with it, but there's a lot of things that you'd be because another thing is like the real antidote, like to all of this, all the moral relativism thing is because like if everything's relative, you can't really even make a decision. Like everything, it's on a whim. Like there's an analogy, the volcano analogy. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but if you would be indifferent. Like that's what relativism is. Like you could have a baby or a rock, and if you have to choose between the three. If you were really a relativist, you could throw all, like, jump in with it with everyone, all three of them, just for the hell of it, because there's no point. So when you find value and meaning in something, then all of a sudden it doesn't become relative. It becomes like, and institutions there's an argument you can make for institutions, but Nagel is making an argument against it, saying basically morality can't be subjective because we are empathetic people. Like, in general, people are nice. They compare, they put themselves in other people's shoes, and then they realize what's wrong about the action. And people with common sense can do that. But yeah, you find, if connection and meeting and institutions create hierarchies. That's a whole nother thing. If you don't have a foundation and something to build off of, it's not easy. There's real solutions in that. Like, I'm a big proponent of what Jordan Peterson says about that, about hierarchies in general. But yeah, I guess that's a caveat.
So his is, like you said, more of on looking at this in an objective perspective, instead of individuals are subjectively,
So like Nietzsche would say,
right, or not. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, like more like objective, like subjectively, like the Nietzsche argument is like, you be the judge, but take things into account. Don't just be superficial about it. Really think about it, and because like the institutions could be corrupt, and like things that are deemed good might end up bad. Things could end up considered good, but like that, you don't fall into that trap if you realize that any reasonable person can look at any scenario, like the examples he gave, right? You could look at the examples and then like realize that if we were robots, maybe it would be different, but like we actually have this connection to each other that like is like a foundation that like prevents us. There are some bad people. Those are outliers, though most people are not. And but at the same time, what you're talking about, the individualistic thing, is like people really they don't really know where their values lie. That's the pitfall. That's the real pitfall of moral relativism, is because if you don't have a value system, if you don't know where, like religion, if you don't have religion or the legal system, or a good social group, for instance, right? If you don't have people, like someone that's antisocial, of course it's relative, because they're making up their value, like they're making up what's right and wrong maybe not on the spot, but like it's as if they don't care. Because you could, if you're really a relativist, it's like, but here's another thing is like, it's situational, right? There's ambiguity and subjectiveness to every situation. So yeah, that's why like I'm not sure about, because there's self-interest and there's other people's interest that you might be trying to we're complicated beings. So like sometimes empathy doesn't work, and that's the argument against Nagel, right? And then sometimes institutions don't work. So then that's Nietzsche's argument. And then sometimes you just don't have a clear understanding of what's right and wrong. Sometimes there's a gray scale to something. Some things sometimes situationally could be the right thing. It's tough. I don't know.
I could be completely off with this, but would you agree with me saying that they could? You said something about values and all that stuff. What about their experiences being a determining factor in how they view morals and how they live their lives?
Right.
You know, basically. So trying to do unto others
Yeah.
until that unto, you know. So yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying, you know, like the golden rule: do unto others as you want to yourself. But their past experiences could definitely influence them on how they are going to, you know, treat people every day. So I mean,
Yes. Yeah. Like they might even like that's mental health's a big issue here because like there's so many factors. There's stress. There's obligation. There's you can't always make the right decision even if you want to, and you're gonna have regrets, and you're gonna and not and that's the idea of like it's people aren't that objective. Like even if morality is objective, people aren't objective. People are subjective. So you're gonna have your own personal reasons for doing something, and it might be true to you, you know, like a vendetta, you know,
mm,
like according to you, some a wrong was done, and you know the legal system is exactly that. It's a balance system. There's a suffer there's a suffering, and then they try to balance it somehow, you know. But if you do the balancing in your own mind without any institutional, it just doesn't work. Like that's why Nagel was saying what he was saying is like, but like at the same time, you can't just get rid of them. I'm not even sure if Nagel is like completely against the idea of legal systems and religious systems. He just thinks it's not enough. Like he thinks people will. He thinks people are.
they'll come to their own conclusions, right? I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Yes, yes. Yeah, they'll come. Well, they'll come to their own conclusions, but ultimately it will follow under the objective idea, like being unless there's something wrong with them, unless there's like a dire circumstances, like where they're not thinking clearly. Most people, if they have any source, any inkling of empathy, if they can put themselves in someone else's shoes, it's weird because you know, you think about the idea of therapy. Empathy is like not exactly the best thing for a therapist to have, because if you're emotionally invested in a client, you're not going to be able to accurately, you know, not to say you won't be able to help them, but like it's going to be harder for you. It's going to take its toll on you. So someone that's less empathetic will be able to make more clear decisions, like logical decisions or whatever you might say. Like they might be able to separate themselves from the situation, and like paramedics, who knows, those kinds of situations where at the same time empathy is not the solution to everything. That's kind of what I'm thinking about too, because good intentions, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you know, justice, like your own social justice, the whole idea of that, you know.
well, here's the thing, like, so when it comes to empathy, like when I was doing the call center job, when I was working as a call rep, one of the things was definitely trying to be empathetic towards the caller, by all means, trying to get them to actually,
Right.
you know, if they were angry or, you know, I would try to, you know, try to diffuse a situation, trying to get them on my side and get what I wanted from them. And but in ethical standards, I have to do this all ethically, but and I have to show empathy with every call. But when it comes to when I ended that job, now I'm back on the customer side, and I'm like, man, I don't want to be the person who would want to lash out on this person because I know they're gonna have to, you know,
You
provide me something. Because at the end of the day, I'm
you
gaining something, and they're also gaining something too, you know. So it's
right. It's mutual, and also just
right,
on
exactly.
to that notion, you're kind of like objectively empathetic, meaning
Right.
previous to the experience, you might have treated, you know, call centers in a negative light. Now, through going through the experience, you've put yourself actually in their shoes as opposed to figuratively,
Mm.
and you've gained a perspective and thus changed your behavior empathetically based on that. And now if you come across one you have more sympathy, more empathy for their situation, and you're not as mean because you've gotten
right. Exactly.
your share of yeah.
Right. Exactly. So
in a lot of ways, this objective thing really works if you really can think about it. There's a chance.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about experience. I had the experience now. Now this makes my behavior, you know what I'm saying? From here on out, I'm on the opposite end now as a customer again, instead of being the representative.
Your values change.
My values change.
Basically, right?
Right.
Your values and your experiences shape your like where you find meaning and all of that. Like, but the real thing is, like, this is the core argument here. People cannot, someone that's empathetic cannot do a bad thing without reflecting on the possibility of harm and how they would feel when something like that happens. How would you feel? If you ask most people, if this happened to you, how would you feel? It prevents people from doing bad. It's not the institution. It's not the religion. Of course, your parents and your experience and the environment, including the legal system and the religious system, shapes you in a lot of ways, you know. And also there's a lot of traumas that like people are different, like you experience different things, and it shapes the way you are. But based on all of that, through your learning experience, you know, that's what wisdom is, you know. But regardless of wisdom, you can still kind of put yourself in their shoes and make the decision. And it's, at the end of the day, it most likely will be the right decision. It's not a utilitarian, like greater good. Like another thing about, like Nietzsche said, he says, you can explain away your values. So he said, in his idea, a lot of the time morality is bad because like, yeah, whatever value, you can explain it away. You can have countless reasons for why whatever you're doing is a good thing, regardless of objectivity or not. So as opposed to like having some sort of foundation, maybe that's why he says to like really think about it. Really think about not just objectively, think about it, how it relates to you and how you feel and how others feel. So like maybe just try to build a greater understanding of it all and be reactive. Don't listen to whatever someone else says. So that's what he says. Yeah. Everyone can make up any reason for anything, basically. That's why he basically anything can be subjective, except for actual facts, maybe.
Right. So yeah, it's your internal will reflect on the external, and then from there, it's going to result in you behaving in a certain way that's either going to either benefit you or be a detriment to others, I think. So like it really begins with you, and then from there, it's external. People are going to react to how you display yourself, I'd say.
And the interesting thing about all of it is like this argument has been had for ages. There's really no solution to because you can explain you can have a good argument for institutions. You can have a good argument for relativism. You can have a good argument for moral realism. It's a debate. But like, I don't know. In my understanding, maybe, you know, some sort of hybrid. I don't know the real solution, but one of the solutions to the political climate is like some sort of possible, you know, like you said, you mentioned, I just can't remember his name, the anarchist, like the popular anarchy guy. Like basically, an anarcho-capitalistic society is an option.
Wait, did I mention him by name? Did I mention him by name? You saying that I mentioned him?
No, you didn't mention him. Okay, I just can't think of him. And then there's another idea where it's like I don't know if that's a real solution, but because, you know, capitalism seems to be the best way to go about it. But you don't always need huge institutions. You could have smaller ones, state ones, whatever. Like make it a monetary thing as opposed to, you know, whoever's in office makes the decisions, or or the other idea where it's like a hybrid of like the left and the right, when you like a unity type idea, like Eric Weinstein's idea of you would have instead of this popularity game that we're doing, just pick the best candidates for, again, it might be a popularity contest regardless, but do your best to find someone who's moderately left and moderately center left, center right, and put them together and see if they can work things out together in office, as opposed to having like this weird distribution every few years. Who really knows? It hasn't been tested. I don't think a lot of things have been really tested that well. So I don't know.
Definitely should be definitely taken into account and worked on.
So my thing is, like, I don't really know where I stand. I look at the ideas and I'm like, okay, I can see a good argument for all of them. But what do you think? What do you think about it? All these variables.
I agree with what he was saying, but when it comes to, I believe individuals will do things, like I said earlier, for if you look at the rational choice theory, the individual first, they're going to do things in their best interest, so self-interest right there, and they'll do everything to maximize their goals by any means necessary. So it is, I believe there is a subjective side to this when it comes to morality, but if you look at the objective scale, that is when that really deals with the society people live in, and what, like I said earlier, it's usually agreed upon what is moral. Like, hey, is, I don't know, when it comes to any of these crimes we have, or like go on daily basis, is immoral. I mean, if, like I said before, like if you have a focus group, some people would justify the deed, and some would be like, "What are you doing? No, that's completely against the law. I'm not down with that." So I believe I'm on both sides. I believe it's subjective and it's also objective. So,
and it's, to be honest, the legal system, like, I don't know about religion, but the legal system is updated pretty often. Like they create new laws, and there weren't that many laws but a long time ago. Like that's now you might be able to try defend yourself back then, but nowadays there's just so many things. Anyway, ultimately, this idea, like, even though it's coming from this kind of, like, it's also sort of Confucius in aspect, Nagel's idea of moral realism. It's like, we're like, in the West, we are individualistic, so empathy might not be the biggest motivator in the West, right? And in the Eastern and other areas of the world, like, a lot of what morality is not really moral. It's just ethics. It's just duty. It's responsibility. It's collective, as opposed to individualistic. And they the way they think about it, the way they think about their actions is for the group, as opposed to myself. The self is almost non-existent in a lot of the cultures in the East. And like in this, and so in reality, it just goes more towards the relative idea. It's like your culture really does influence you, and it is different. It's interesting to see the melting pot that there is in the West, bringing these other cultures in, and how it shapes everything over time. But yeah, that's another aspect.
Absolutely. So, I mean, do you have anything else you want to add, or?
No, I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. But,
okay, right. Yeah, this was good. So I definitely would.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely would want you to have you on for another episode, and
I'll look forward to it.
For sure, for sure.
For more information on this podcast, you can go on realfreeflowingwords.blog. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode's topic and would like to listen to more, subscribe on Spotify or whichever platforms you get your podcasts on. After subscribing, give the podcast a rating and review. The show has been made possible by Anchor, which is providing a great and easy-to-use service for new and seasoned podcasters. Lastly, thank you for listening to Real Free Flowing Words with the Rhyme Ruler. And it's been real.